The invention of the internet has led to an influx of information being available at everyone's fingertips, seemingly limitless knowledge just ripe for the picking if you desire to know more about the world around you. At any given moment, you could study complex scientific theories, break down the finer points of literature, take note of major historical events that have occurred throughout history, and even take up writing your own webpage for other online denizens to find and scroll through. In my opinion, for all of the internet's faults, it is easily one of the most important inventions by man. While it can be used for basically anything, it serves as a testament to mankind's aspiration to share any and all information on their discoveries with other people. Very few other inventions in recent years have had the same impact that the information superhighway has had. With all of this important data just getting thrown around back and forth online, it goes without saying that less vital media tends to get thrown into the mix quite often. It could have something to do with a funny animation somebody made, a game that you can illegally download because you're cheap, or maybe even some fictional story that a particularly motivated basement writer put together. Or maybe it's something lewd, like adult media. There really is no limit on what you can see online. Some people have taken to the internet to spread their obscure art with others in hopes of touching the hearts of other like-minded individuals. One of these troubled people goes by the stage name Tonetta, and his decades of artistic refinement have become the subject of scrutiny and observation for many years. Anthony Jeffrey, known better by his online handle Tonetta, was born on February 17, 1949. He was born in Cabbagetown, which is a neighborhood of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Since his childhood, Tony has been fascinated with the arts, including painting, sculpting, and of course music. He began to play guitar when he was in his early teens, somewhere from the ages of 12 to 14, creating his own unique sound that had put him on the map many years later. Creating art is something that, while occasionally profitable, has always been more of a passion project for Tony rather than an outlet for financial gain. While yes, his life's work has helped pay the bills, he mainly does what he does for himself, simply creating drawings and music to make himself happy. But being able to share it online with a wide audience of random people gives him a sense of artistic freedom. No matter what he does, regardless of how unusual or different it may seem, he will always have some kind of cult following. He was a man who had his life on track. He had a wife, kids, a job as an upholsterer, a home to call his own, but all of that came crashing down in 1983. His private life was something that his wife could not handle, taking the kids and the property, leaving him behind to sulk alone with his own thoughts. We'll learn more about his private life in just a moment. All this time to ruminate gave him the opportunity to reflect on the decisions that he'd made that got him there. Once you hit rock bottom, where do you go? Sure, you're supposed to go up, but where do you even begin? After about a year of grieving the loss of his previous life, he began to write down his thoughts, stories, poems, and most importantly, music. He yearned for a medium where he could freely express himself without judgment or boundaries that would limit his means of finding himself. It was at this point where he shut himself off from society, latching the gate shut and bolting the door. He no longer wanted the outside world to influence the way he lived, so he sought to keep himself away from anything that could alter his perspective and overall perception of reality. Prior to his internet notoriety, Tony was handing out custom music tapes in Toronto on foot, placing them in the hands of interested parties as they walked by and went about their daily routines. When this failed to produce a healthy audience, Tony started renting tapes from a video rental shop and recorded his work at the end of the tapes, which would likely offend the next person who was going to watch a movie to the very last frame. While this likely got some eyes on him, it was still a limited means of self-marketing, and not a very well thought out one. Eventually, in 2008, he'd share his inner thoughts with the internet, ranging from audio to video, shocking any passerby that happens to stumble upon his work. Tonetta's discography is extremely perverse, featuring themes of sex, violence, drug use, trauma, and racism. Quite the interesting concoction, if I do say so myself. Sex is the biggest part of his work because he has a deep infatuation with it despite claiming to have not engaged in intercourse since about 1983. I've actually seen a video of him blowing a guy, so I have a few doubts about this. His desire to plow someone coupled with his love of a little bit of exhibitionism led to him using media as a form of coping. There's definitely worse ways to get out your sexual frustrations. Most of his songs are sexually charged in nature, likely as a means to satiate his lust for intimate interactions. I guess just yeeting the meat doesn't scratch that kind of itch for him, so sharing his deeper thoughts with the internet will have to do. To illustrate this better, let's take a brief look at his music for just a moment, shall we? His hit song, Pressure Zone, is all about sucking and fucking his favorite friend with a long dangling member between his legs.
I can't wait to put it in my mouth, up my crack, in my ass. I'm so horny I could choke and choke on a cup tonight.
Another one of his popular tracks, called Really Big Cock, is all about an unfathomably powerful and desirable pecker.
It's thick, it's long, it's well hung. It's a really nice one.
Yet another standout is Hell, where he sings about wasting his hard-ons on a relationship that he was getting nothing out of.
Have it heard, so you can go fuck yourself, oh you can go fuck yourself.
And who could forget Older Women, where he talks about his balls being filled with semen, among other things.
My balls are filled with sperm and the need to ejaculate. An older woman knows the remedy. It's a woman of experience. Come with me, yeah.
Alongside featuring themes of sexual exploration and adultery, Tony also enjoys writing about bodily functions, such as taking a dump or a leak. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, his song Viral. It has several lyrics that mention forgetting to relieve oneself in the restroom. The rest of the song is sexually charged, so coupling the lyrics with getting down and dirty and some bathroom topics makes me believe that maybe duty is something that he takes a lot of pleasure in.
She said she forgot to pee. He said he forgot to shit. Open to the public, piss and shit. No one gives a fuck anymore.
Another song that features disgusting subject matter is aptly titled I Went Poo Poo.
I'm a chimpanzee. You can watch me shit and pee. I'm a chimpanzee. You can watch me shit and pee.
You're so hilarious.
I can't imagine why any record label hasn't picked him up after his many decades of refining his craft. There has never been another person who has been quite so powerful with their lyricism and subject matter. He truly is one of the greats, if not the greatest musician to ever live, or ever will live for that matter. Mr. Jeffrey claims that he and his music draw heavy influence from legendary performers such as the Beatles, Michael Jackson, John Lennon, and Elvis Presley. You know, I suppose John Lennon and the Beatles were kind of the same thing, but you know. You can definitely find their influences in his song titles alone, including but not limited to Drugs, 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 which, by the way, Tony recalls that this was the first song that he wrote in 1983, Ultimate Whore, Daddy's a Little Boy, Obama's Prize, I'm Gonna Marry a Prostitute, A Really Big Cock. He thrusted himself into music around the time John Lennon died, which affected him deeply and motivated him to pursue his interest. He honored him the best way he knew how, by singing about giving and receiving anal sex. Before joining YouTube, like I said prior, Tony shared his music by passing out homebrew cassettes. Someone who knew of his work after receiving the tape offered to help him set up a YouTube page upon learning that Tony had no idea what YouTube even was. His music is actually what put him on the map. When he began to share his work online, people found him by complete accident and were enamored by his musical prowess. This, coupled with his live-action music videos that featured him dancing around in women's underwear, wigs, and a creepy mask, really set him apart from his contemporaries. His videos have this bizarre, uncanny valley-like vibe about them. It could be the unusual costumes that he wears, the ancient recording equipment that he uses, the tone of the music, or anything really, just pick your poison. Either way, it all culminates into an unorthodox collection of melodies and visual decay. He began to accumulate views almost immediately due to his eccentric creations having a humorous but creepy vibe to them, which was still a very new concept for the web at the time. His channels would be struck down left and right, one after another, due to the extremely adult nature of his content. Despite this, he caught the attention of Dirk Kaniebe, who had his own record label called Black Tint Press. He linked up with Tony, learned about the process that goes into making his music, and offered to release Tony's work via physical prints. For anybody who's an aspiring musician, this kind of opportunity is a dream come true, and the same can be said for Tony, as he was thrilled that his music could be shared with a wider audience, not to mention that he can now make a little extra scratch as he did his thing. Under Kaniebe's record label, Tony has released multiple albums, including 777 Volume 1 and 2 in 2010, with Volume 3 dropping the following year in 2011. He has also released 2 other albums, named Red Wine in 2013 and a Christmas album in 2019. Each volume is built from nearly 30 years of consistent work and refinement of his trade. His entire discography is kinda tricky to get your hands on legitimately these days. While you can find archives of his work in several places, official avenues for acquiring his product are few and far between. His Bandcamp seems to have most of his music, but I've noticed a handful of tracks being inconsistent or missing entirely. Additionally, his presence on Apple Music and Spotify as of this moment is very limited, with only a handful of tracks being available, no complete albums, let alone any of his most popular songs. But he wouldn't stop selling cassette tapes either, as he found many as he was cleaning out his storage space. In order to get the most out of Tony's work, you essentially have to enjoy unusual music over a long period of time and wait for the right moment to get a version of his work that you can hold on to. One of his most popular songs, named Pressure Zone, is how many of us found him. I discovered Tonetta during the summer of 2012. I was recommended a video called Copper Cab in Real Life, which was uploaded during the time that people were laughing at the Gingers Have Souls kid. I noticed that the video thumbnail featured some ghastly-looking individual wearing a spooky mask in their underwear, and I gotta admit, I was extremely intrigued. I reluctantly hovered my mouse over the video's thumbnail, pressed down on the mouse wheel to open the video in a new tab, and I was immediately hit with the renowned beauty of this song. This video, right here, changed the trajectory of my life and helped me realize just how powerful music can really be. Not only could it be captivating and emotionally driven, but it can also be unintentionally hilarious. Ever since, I've periodically checked in on Tonetta, mortified with every new discovery. I don't know what it is that pulled me in. The bizarre, creepy mask, the stiff but rhythmic dancing, the disgusting shit slop that he put together in his cooking videos. Something about him is just so enchanting to me. It's like a train wreck. I just can't look away. His musical notoriety eventually caught the attention of Daniel Tosh, who was ready to swoop in like a vulture and peck at the rotting corpse that is Tonetta's musical history. Tony was featured in a 2013 episode of Tosh.0, where they jokingly touched on his history and the legacy of his musical career. Unfortunately, nothing of value was ever produced by Daniel, so the show merely served to mock Tonetta and nothing more. But Tony was a good sport about it. His music is his life, really. His entire artistic expression and his ability to do so is what keeps him going. If you strip this man of his individuality, you have nothing left but an individual who was burned by the world. That, alongside with his copious amounts of free time, is what fuels his creative endeavors. Tony claims that his late brother, who committed suicide, encouraged him to put his heart and soul into his craft. This guy, who loved his brother very much, wanted to see him take his emotions and bring them to life through writing and the process of creating music. While I don't know if his brother had any idea of what Tony was up to or going to create, especially given the subject matter of his music, it is sweet to know that the two had a healthy relationship and his sibling encouraged him to live the most fulfilling life that he could. He actually wrote a song about his brother called My Bro. The first verse is incredibly vulgar, but the hurt emotions are still readily apparent throughout the entire track.
She shit him out, wiped him off, cleaned his ass, and time passed. He took an oath to be true, and I guess he loved only you, mama.
I mean, the first verse literally has the line, she shit him out, she wiped him off, cleaned his ass 10 times past. I don't really know what that means about him and his brother, but sure, why not? His music has a very unique sound to it, but the way it's put together is honestly not all that different from other eccentric artists from a bygone era. His tracks tend to recycle the same themes and sounds, usually reusing the same melodies with slightly adjusted tempos or an additional instrument stem thrown in. The general chord progression is shared through a majority of his work. Some of the tracks that sound similar are Can't Wait to Make Love, Set Aflame, Lady Gaga, The recycling of chords is very similar to what was seen in Wesley Willis's discography, as a vast majority of his songs are the same exact backing track adjusted to be faster or slower depending on the theme and context of the song's lyrics, even if they were about whooping Batman's ass and sucking on a camel's booty hole. Tony believes that music doesn't need to be complicated. While yes, you can go to an actual engineering studio where you can use professional equipment, have engineers help you make your track along with using proper soundproofing, it's all stuff that you don't really need. Sometimes it's fine just to record yourself in your living space. It's totally fine to make your magnum opus on your own terms, because after all, it is your music. This mindset is admirable and confirms that he sees this as more of a self-gratifying passion project rather than something he needs in order to make it big. He's living by his own terms, even if his way of life is a bit peculiar to say the least. His content doesn't always revolve around his music either. He has had a plethora of YouTube accounts that were either suspended, he forgot the login credentials to, or he decided to create a new one. Regardless, his fleet of media ranges from aimless rambling to strange videos of him making kissing noises to cooking. By God, the cooking videos are absolutely rancid. Many years ago, Tony released a video called Tonetta Cooks Burgers that featured exactly what the title suggests. However, the meat he shows doesn't appear to be typical ground beef or any other type of ground-up deceased animal product I've ever seen. He lovingly refers to them as poo burgers, and when coupled with him actually appearing to look like human excrement, it raises several red flags. That's right, Tonetta appeared to be playing with his own shit on video, and this piece of media is still on YouTube to this very day. I've gone ahead and censored the video just in case that it is actually his booty butter. I'm unsure if it's verifiably his duty, but either way, I don't doubt that he's played with his mookie sticks. He's just got that look about him.
Here we are with some sugar. As you can see, it says sugar, and here we're going to put it into the bowl with the poo burger. Okay. Some soy sauce. Mix it right in there. Let's go get some milk. Into the fridge. So we got soy sauce, sugar. We need more milk. We have a little, it's like a baby's bottle. Let's see if there's any milk. Yes, it looks like there's milk in it. Let's put some milk. Okay. There we go, an egg. Let's crack the egg. Crack, crack, crack. Pop, pop, pop. There we go. We just want the white. Because the white is the... Oops, the yellow fell in, but we only wanted the white because the white is the protein. But let's leave it all in now. Now we're going to mix it up. La-di-da-di-da. My little poo burgers.
In another video titled Tonetta Cooks Fish, he manages to burn frozen fish by throwing it into a hot wok. This is arguably very minor and doesn't really mean anything other than him just not having standards for food, but then again I suppose all standards were thrown out when he started chowing down on his droppings. I don't know about you guys, but if I was trying my hand at cooking videos and I only managed to burn the frozen fish I was attempting to unthaw, I'd probably just give up and not upload the video, but then again, that's just me. Years ago, even though Tony's work is absolutely bonkers, I'd actually put on some of his cooking videos for background noise while I was working on personal projects, and this stuff was weirdly comfy. He gives off a somewhat jovial demeanor, clearly not intending to offend anyone, even if he was often sporting a creepy costume while making his dishes. One of my favorites has to be his rigatoni video, where he just makes pasta and doesn't act too strangely. I find it's best enjoyed by hitting yourself in the head and cowering in the corner while watching, so as to pretend that he kidnapped you and beat you over the head, and now he's gonna feed you some of his Canadian slop. What, just me? Okay, maybe don't try that then. Anyway, moving along, maybe it's time we finally delve into his stage character. Tonetta is actually the name of his alter ego, the character he assumes the role of whenever he's playing dress-up in front of the camera. He has once stated that he has a sexual attraction to this imaginary character, and I speculate that it is likely part of what motivates him to continue creating songs and films. Doing these things brings him closer to the Tonetta persona and allows him to escape reality for just a tiny bit. When he's wearing the mask, his entire universe is in his control at that very moment. Bills, people, financial instability, and the ever-growing worrisome political climate of the world means nothing to him when he's able to remove himself from the clutches of modern society. In his mind, when he's performing as Tonetta, the perverse things he says are not just him, but rather the inner machinations of the Tonetta character. In his eyes, he is merely a vessel for her thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions. In a way, I suppose you could argue that Tony is a method actor, becoming fully captivated by the personality he's performing as. As for the romantic attraction to the identity, that could be a sign of unchecked mental illness. However, it's surprisingly common for isolated people to become attached to a fictional being, such as an imaginary friend, their favorite fictional characters in media, or an adopted persona, which may very well be the case for Tony. Tony has isolated himself for many years, believing that living alone is one of the things that empowers him and gives him the creative juices necessary to keep honing his skills. But he didn't just cut people out of his life, but new television, music, and even the internet were all excluded from his day-to-day routine. This has been his persistent way of living since 1983. He has obviously since adopted using the World Wide Web and continues to use it as a means of sharing his songs and making money, but anytime he mentions listening to music in his vlogs, it's always archives of his work or old albums by other musicians that he's held onto for years, having listened to them countless times. Similarly, he's only ever been seen watching VHS tapes and DVDs of old films and shows that he's already quite familiar with. He appears to find comfort in repetition, as if the world he's built for himself doesn't change because it doesn't have to change. He also believes the radio is pre-programmed because all it does is play the same shitty new music and reruns of all the old good stuff ad nauseum. What the hell does he expect the radio to do? Not play back music or sound? That'd be weird. The world would be a much better place if we could power on the radio, turn the dial to our favorite stations, and catch a sticky rerun of our favorite Tonetta singles. There's nothing quite like being on a long road trip and fighting away the sleepies by blasting some songs about violent, weird sex. Due to Tony isolating himself and generally having repeated bad experiences with other people, his social life verges on non-existence. While it's hard to say exactly why he lives this way, due to him being an unreliable narrator of his own experiences, it's safe to assume that he is the common denominator in all of his problems. For example, he hates his wife for leaving him, yet he intentionally fails to understand why she likely wanted to keep the children and herself away from his antics. He can't even conduct business without problems, such as his failures regarding music archival with outside sources. Regarding that, thanks to a large amount of his music being stored away in physical archives that are only deteriorating with time, Tony has occasionally taken to digitizing his work in order to sell it or at least share it with his audience. However, this is a practice that has been largely inconsistent. In early 2022, this practice was put to the test by a curious fan and journalist, Simon Cameron Hutton. At this time, Tony was selling cassette tapes through his Bandcamp account, all of which were being removed from a storage space. Most cassettes were poorly encased in bubble wrap and exposed to varying temperatures and moisture. Simon bit the bullet and purchased one of the tapes. The cassette arrived fast, and as Simon opened the package, he learned it was initially wrapped on approximately May 18, 1989. A majority of the songs on the tape were seemingly unknown or undocumented online. Simon chose to digitize the audio and put it up online for anybody to listen to for free, complete with a disclaimer to purchase music directly from Tony via his Bandcamp page. The video archive did well enough, eventually catching the attention of Tony himself, who was not pleased with these developments. Irritated because in his own words, quote, "YouTube steals songs," without any further elaboration. "Makes sense to me." Simon removed the video and apologized. The two would converse through direct messages a fair bit, leading to Tony agreeing to meet with Simon at Tonetta's leased Dungeon of Love. Simon promised to bring a CD copy of the May 1989 tape so Tony could give it a listen and maybe give some insight into the creation of his work. Simon arrived at Tony's hovel on May 17, 2022, nestled away in a residential area of Toronto. Tony recognized Simon almost immediately, waving at him and meeting him in the apartment complex's lobby. Upon meeting him, it became abundantly clear that Tony is a very troubled person who struggles with various complex mental health issues. When he wasn't tripping over the clutter in his space, he was rambling on about how much he hated his wife, the money he owed in child support for his 50-something-year-old children, how the earth is slowly dying due to innovations made by mankind. You know, the exact opposite of what Simon was hoping to learn about during his visit. Tony's place was littered with bizarre imagery as depicted in his videos, including unnatural-looking theater masks, wigs hanging from exposed hooks and hangers, and even a few child dolls lingering about. Simon was understandably creeped out by all of this, but managed to steer the dominating conversation over to the topic at hand, Tony's work. Tony took the CD, popped it into his laptop, and gave it a listen, occasionally giving surface-level anecdotal observations about his decades-old recordings. Simon offered to convert his old tapes and preserve them by digitizing them for absolutely no cost on Tony's end, which surprised him as usually everybody wants some kind of monetary payment for their work. According to Simon's article on their interactions, their conversation went something like this. "I remind Tony that converting tapes to digital is something I do a lot as a musician, and that I'd love to do this for him for totally free, to properly archive his tapes and preserve them for years, just like I did with the May 1989 tape." His eyes widen as he asks me, "For free? Why not sell what you find on the tapes?" "Because I can't do that to you," I say. "But why? Don't you want to make money?" "This isn't about money, Tony. I make you CDs of old tapes and you sell them. It would make sense to do this because the tape is fragile and doesn't last forever. Doing this for you would only take a bit of my time. It would be no problem for me to do this for you." His face scrunches. He seemed confused by what I'm saying. "What I'm saying is I just want to help you get some of this stuff out there. You make the money, I only convert the tapes to files and give them to you." All my stuff is on Bandcamp, not the songs in the May 1989 CD. What if there's more stuff on these tapes that's not on Bandcamp? I gestured towards the stack of VHS tapes on the floor, the labels scrawled on with variations of the Tone Collection, or Tony's Music, or Tony's Tunes. He shrugs. Yeah, you're right. Okay, fine. He mentions to me that it'd take hours to go through everything and he doesn't have all of his material on Bandcamp, but he'd like to. Tony grabbed 5 different VHS tapes from a miscellaneous pile he had on the floor and gave them to Simon. Tony preferred Simon archive the contents of the VHS tapes because he didn't have a functioning VCR at the time. Storing just audio on VHS tape seems a little strange to me, but sure, I suppose that's one way of doing it. Simon assured Tony that while he would definitely be able to complete the task, he was going to need some time because this was a good amount of work. Simon returned home and eventually began the process of transferring the audio data onto his computer. Unfortunately, these tapes were old and stored improperly, with tracking issues and static plaguing every song. But despite this, the audio was somehow clearer than his stuff that you can find online. However, the moldy tapes left a lot to be desired and indicated that this could be a trickier process than initially thought. Simon made sure to keep Tony updated with 30-second snippets of audio and assured him that while the whole thing was taking longer than anticipated and likely would continue in that fashion, he was making progress nonetheless. Tony understood this, but he later lied on Facebook claiming that Simon essentially stole the tapes and did not maintain correspondence with him. This, of course, is patently false. Tony made a Facebook post saying something along the lines of, "Warning, watch out for this person. They owe me money. I want money or my tapes back. This person lied to get these tapes from me," while featuring 2 photos of Simon's face. He even claimed that he only gave the tapes to Simon after he, quote, kept bugging him despite Simon offering to digitize the audio for completely free. After this, Simon and a friend who accompanied him for his safety went to Tony's residence to return the tapes. They heard movement inside the apartment, just behind the door, indicating that Tony was hiding behind the entrance and spying on the people attempting to give him his tapes back. The exact tapes he was whining about online. This is what he wanted, right? They left the tapes at the door, and the rest is history. Tony responded to all of this by releasing a song called Simon Says, which he accused the writer of sending people after him, which is total nonsense. The song was likely referencing the fact that Simon brought a friend with him due to safety concerns. He'd also perpetuate this lie on Facebook in hopes of convincing people that he is a delicate victim.
The kid sent a guy to my address trying to intimidate me, parked for hours out front, but let the truth be told, I never asked the kid to do anything for me. He came to my place with all intentions to leave with something, so get lost.
This entire situation beautifully illustrates that Tonetta, while artistic and avant-garde, is an unreliable narrator who likely deals with extremely complicated mental health issues on a daily basis. An incredible amount of his work is likely going to be lost due to his inability to socialize with others without problems. This is part of the tragic nature of his story. Regardless of his flaws and peculiar traits, he is still a human being with thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and his artwork is a vessel for that which will largely be lost to time. Sure, his music is about sex and violence and his anger towards the world, but so many other artists have had their work immortalized with similar subject matter, so why not him? His content may be hilarious at times, downright uncomfortable to listen to at others, but there's definitely some kind of magic in his media. There's love put into it. Dirty, nasty love, but love nonetheless. Despite everything, Tonetta is renowned by his followers as a true icon of artistic expression and musical compilation. While he may have interests that are definitely out of the ordinary and may have difficulties with socializing with people alongside forming long-term meaningful relationships, he is merely a man who is trapped by his thoughts, a fate many would consider to be worse than death. Creating and sharing his work is what gives him purpose, but if you try to strike up a conversation with him about it, he treats it as though it's just a thing. A small thing, nothing too important, just a pastime. But regardless of how minuscule he tries to suggest his art is, it clearly means a lot more to him than he could ever hope to put into words. His following is incredibly varied, with each member of his fandom coming from a different background, each with their own reason as to why they enjoy what he does. For some, it's hilarious to watch an elderly man dance around in a mask and wig while singing about touching somebody's privates, while others find him to be an engaging entertainer that isn't afraid to speak what's on his mind. While I can't say that I'm a fan of the subject matter of his songs, and I do find his way of living to be kinda strange, I can't say I hate the guy either. Well, I do gotta say his cooking videos make me want to reconsider my stance and repaint my office's walls with my vomit, but still, he's harmless and he's just withering away in his apartment, creating tunes for other people who feel the same way he does, filling in what time he has left with what gives him purpose. In a way, I find it admirable that he's able to live out his golden years doing what he loves, and we should all strive to be as content with life as he is. I mean, within reason, of course. Tony's up there in age, and likely doesn't have a long duration left on this spinning green and blue ball. When he was once asked how he'd like to be remembered, Tony replied with the following. I don't know. I think I was born with a gift, eh? I don't think I could stop if I wanted to. All I know is the reason I'm doing this is when I die, I don't want my music to die. When I die, I want my kids to know what I was all about. And it's kinda working cause they know me now. All these years they haven't seen me, but they still know. Years ago, my wife said, I don't want them taken after you. And they were doing that, eh? Hopping on the back of my motorcycle, wearing leather jackets, getting their ear pierced at 8 years old. She put a stop to it. She got rid of me. That's all. I think that's basically what the story is all about. She didn't want them taken after me. We're a different class. Even her father says we're one cut above. They were the Higgins and we were the Jeffreys, so they thought they were a better class, I guess. My son's still there. He gets in touch now and again. He doesn't like my stuff anyways. He doesn't like the language, but I think that's what people like. If I just wrote a love song, I don't get as many views. But when I'm horsing around, acting like an idiot, I get lots of views. Some of them got 160,000 views. Tony will likely continue to make music and videos to accompany them for as long as he is physically able to. This will likely be the case until his bitter end. Regardless of how you or I may feel about him and the emotions that others may have towards him, Tony has lived a long life with plenty of time to think about the decisions that he and others have made. He may not exactly be thrilled with how his story has panned out, or he may be ecstatic that he can live the way he does, but either way, he's lived a full life to his standard, and that's about all anybody could ever dream or hope for. Despite everything, he did what he set out to do, and I find that fascinating. There may never be another man quite like Tony Jeffrey, and that's okay, because he's definitely left his mark. Just don't accept any gifts from him. I don't trust anything that was in that apartment of his. But that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.